Good afternoon, and welcome to part 2 of Unleashing Community, an exploration of the Y's response to the multi-generational crises we are facing in Seattle. I'm Greg Gorder, a board member of the YMCA of Greater Seattle and a part of its development committee, which is hosting today's learning session. Before we begin our program, let's acknowledge that the Seattle area is the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, who as Indigenous persons had this land settled by others without their permission. Let us also pause for a moment to give deference to those original stewards of these lands. Pandemic, recession, social distancing, systemic inequity. As we all know, these crises have had a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged children, youth, families, and elders. The Y's core focus is whole person health. To help our community thrive, we achieve this focus one child, one family, one aging adult at a time. Helping our community thrive is why my family invests our philanthropy in education, housing, and advocacy. I was a volunteer lifeguard for the Y before I joined the board. Like many of you, I knew the Y for its focus on swimming and exercise. Learning how the Y, through its people, programs, and properties, brings just and equitable outcomes for those who are less fortunate, led me to join the board and volunteer as a fundraiser. For over a century, the Y has convened community to investigate, learn, and act, building solutions for our toughest challenges that government and business alone cannot meet. Today, we've convened you, community builders, family advocates, and equity champions, to learn with us about the crises we see escalating in our community. Crises that are made worse for those in our community with greater barriers to remote education, to uncrowded housing, to working from home, and to healthcare that can counteract COVID-19. Thank you for joining us on this learning journey. I hope you leave today's journey inspired and ready to unleash community into collective action. We cannot do it without you. Today's program begins with hearing real-life stories from a panel of frontline staff and individuals who are part of the programs in the Y's Social Impact Center. We'll then transition to talk about the crisis, solutions, and opportunities to engage. During any part of today's program, we invite you to submit comments and questions in the chat box. To respond to our community's most critical needs, the Y has deployed educators, counselors, and resource navigators. Leading that deployment is a talented team of community-based researchers, practitioners, and leaders who are building coalitions from the government, business, and social sectors to respond. Mark Putnam, Executive Director of the Y's Social Impact Center, is one of those community leaders. He is a proven advocate and educator in social services. We are fortunate to have someone with Mark's experience leading the panel discussion today. Mark, welcome. We're eager to learn more. Thank you for leading this conversation.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Mark Putnam. I'm the Executive Director of the Social Impact Center of the Y of Greater Seattle. And I couldn't be more pleased to welcome our group of panelists today. I get the honor of introducing and interacting and spotlighting this great panel. Each of our panelists has a real unique view into the lives of youth in our area, and they're going to share some stories and learnings with the group today. You'll have a chance as well to answer some questions. I also just want to say, today is about sharing what the Y is learning about the physical and mental crises in our community and the associated impacts and trauma on young people. We want to share some of that information today so we're kind of grounded in what's happening, and then also really, I think, share some really uplifting things that are happening in ways that you and as community members can help. I also just want to say the Social Impact Center is the Y's social services wing. We provide services to some of our most vulnerable neighbors, to youth, young adults, families, and we provide housing, services for foster youth, mental health support, and so much more. I also want to say, without further ado, that each of our 4 panelists today are really heroes, doing essential work in 2020. Really one of the toughest years, the toughest year I think many of us have faced. The coronavirus pandemic, a year of racial injustice and social protest, and a divisive election year. So I want to just thank off the top our staff, our volunteers, and our young people for just being strong and resilient. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce you to our panel. You can see their names up here. I think what I'll do is have, as you each answer a question, just introduce yourself and your role, what role you're playing in the community and with the Y as well. So we're going to start off by asking Barbara. Please introduce yourself. Thank you so much for joining us, Barbara. You've been with us with the Y for a long time as a foster parent. How have things changed for the youth and young adults in your life during this year? Just check off mute there, Barbara. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I asked my children. I have a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, and 2 16-year-olds. And I said, well, how do you feel about this? And the 16-year-olds said, we don't like it because we there's no social. They can't be with their friends. They can't go to parties. They can't go to games. And it's just, having class online is just terrible. She says, how can I plan for my future when I've got to see a screen every day? The younger ones miss their friends. They really miss being social, playing. The one who likes basketball, he really wants to play. And so even visiting their families, they got where they could visit their families, and then it was snatched away because they could not. Now, that was really hard. They took it as something personal, something they had done, even though it wasn't their fault. And
Barbara,
so,
can you explain that a little more? What you're saying is you're fostering these 3 young people, such an important role that you're playing in the community. They also have connections to their biological family, and they haven't been able to see them because of the restrictions around the virus.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was hard for them because they couldn't see them because they were in a place that they couldn't see them. And then when they could see them, they couldn't see them because of the virus. And so they want to go home. They want to go home real bad. And so one of the things that I've done over the years is have a connection with the birth family so that I'm talking to them. And so that has helped. That has really helped me being able to help both. And so I enjoy it. I mean, I've been with the Y over 30 years, so doing the same thing, and I enjoy it.
Let's not let that be lost. You've been fostering families, not just with the Y, but really for the community in Seattle, and throughout the region. I think taking kids from throughout the region for 30 years. How many kids have you?
It's been over 300. I mean,
oh my gosh!
I joined the Y a year after they started the program. So
yeah, that's amazing. You've been a hero for a long time, but particularly this year. And then just one last thing before I turn to Aisha. You typically would host and welcome back a lot of anyone who wanted to come back for Thanksgiving, and you weren't able to do that this year. I don't know how you fit everyone in the house, but this year was different.
I did. It was different, yeah. And this year, a girl who I had 14 years ago had called me and asked me if she could come for dinner, and her daughter. And I really felt bad when she couldn't come because she'd never asked me before. And they just know they can come back for Thanksgiving. It's just a written rule. No matter where you've been, how horrible you were, you're welcome back. And so it was different this year.
Different this year for sure. We're all dealing with those things, but thank you for everything you do, and we'll definitely come back to you. Okay. Aisha works on our team, our education initiatives team in Kent, at Birch Creek, and throughout that community. What about for you? How have things changed for youth and young adults in your life your life this year. You're also a young adult yourself. How have things changed for you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Just to reiterate what Barbara said, it was definitely a sudden shift for our youth. They went from seeing their friends daily to not seeing them at all. So last week, I actually went to go see a parent to drop off a gift to one of our students who we had over this summer. And I spoke to the parent, and she really talked about how much she was worried about her son's mental health. So he's been at home since February, really, when schools have been shut down, and he has not had any like physical contact with his friends, and he's been at home all like for most of 2020. And so that, when I heard that, I mean, that was just last week when I heard that, it really struck me. For a lot of our students, I serve a lot of low income students who also live with a number of family members in their home. So a majority of our students actually have like at least 5 siblings that they live with. And we're talking about like really small apartments, maybe 3 bedrooms for some of them, 2 to 4 bedrooms. So constantly being around their family, which is much different from the past. In the past, a typical day for them was pretty much go to school in the morning, come to the youth center, kind of chill with us, maybe sports before they come to the youth center, and then they go home pretty much to sleep. And so that's definitely been different for them. Their cultural spaces, I think this is probably the most important component. Those spaces are no longer accessible to them. So cultural spaces are pretty much areas in which youth create meaning and self-identity. So like for our youth, like I said, that's sports, that's the basketball courts, whether those are the outdoor ones or the ones that we have at our youth centers, restaurants. So I know a lot of them would like come together at like the local teriyaki spot, the local Pizza Hut. They can't do that anymore. Just being around their friends all day too at the youth center. And everything that I just said is just like a small piece of the pie. That's without mentioning, right? Like being displaced out of their homes. I remember helping, I mean, like I don't know much about housing, but I remember helping a mother who got a letter, right? And she couldn't read English. But her daughter, who was actually 10, was the one who saw the letter. And she's really scared. She was just like, oh my God, we're getting kicked out, right? So parents losing their jobs, like I said, English learners and children of immigrants having to fill out paperwork for parents, like unemployment. So, and just like really losing loved ones. So it's been pretty much not something that they were expecting this year. And that's not even to mention some of their other loved ones that they lost, people who they look up to, right? So it's been a lot. Like, I feel like every week it's something, and I really feel for our youth.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, it is overwhelming, and for young people with with large families, there's different dynamics, right? Of having to find a corner in the house to be able to do virtual school, or and maybe your younger siblings are being loud in the background and you're trying to pay attention, or parents that are maybe aren't first English they're English learners, right? It's not their first language. And so, like you said, a young person needing to kind of step into a different type of role than they're used to, which, maybe isn't unique to the pandemic, but is something that, additional responsibility for those kids. You also mentioned, as we talked about this beforehand, just, when you think of 2020, the first thing you think of is not coronavirus. It's the racial injustice and the protests and the impact, and that you think, you said you're not alone as with the young people that you're working with. Will you say more about that?
Yeah, so for a lot of our young people, we tend to look at them as people who are kind of naive and not really knowing what's going on, but they instantly noticed something in May and June when George Floyd got killed, and we started hearing a lot about Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and, the protests. So our students were like really just waiting for all the other adults in their lives, so maybe in school and wherever else, to put something out, say something, make a statement about it, right? Talk to them about it. So they're just waiting and waiting. And one of the things that a number of youth told me were just, it's so crazy because when COVID-19 hit, people were panicking. There were so many statements going out. There was a lot of communication. But now that this is happening and it's only affecting a small group of people, nobody's saying anything, nobody's doing anything, we're not getting help. So that it was a really, really difficult time, and especially with my position as well, because for the first time ever in youth work, I didn't know what to do, because I was like, I feel the same way as you guys right now. And so they got to see, and it really did strengthen our relationship as the months went on, because they got to see that side in us, right? So it wasn't just me, it was also the rest of the team. The youth actually coming together, helping us figure out what we're going to do next, rather than waiting for us to kind of tell them what to do. So it was a really, really difficult time, and it really did add on to the pandemic. But for our youth and for me, it was a learning curve as well, in a moment of resiliency.
I think that's really important to point out. Our staff and other agencies, teachers, everybody in the community really having to lean into kind of different conversations, or we're all tested this year. So I appreciate you being honest about that, Aisha. All right, I'm going to turn to Melinda and Philip. And Melinda, if you'd go first. Melinda is a mental health therapist, works throughout King County, but has a focus in Sammamish with the Y branch there. You led a suicide prevention webinar series during Suicide Prevention Month in September. Tell us and Aisha mentioned, mental health being a real factor for young people, for all people, but certainly for young people. Sally's going to talk more about that. What's working to help young people? What's working? What kind of services are you involved with to really support them through this tough time?
Right. So yeah, we're working with a lot of community partners through this. So instead of being competitions for services, we're coming together and we're basically kind of approaching this community collectively as a networking system. So something that you're right that we offered the suicide prevention webinar that we did in September. We're actually going to be doing that again, and we're going to say continuing the conversation for March. So in March, we're going to launch another suicide prevention series. So we have some really amazing speakers coming on and to do some training about suicidality and what that looks like in teens and adolescents and, our youth. So like I said, those things are on the forefront where we're always bringing these opportunities in to educate the community. Some of the other things that we're doing is we have a really great group of interns working with our outpatient mental health team, and they're going into the schools and they're providing spaces and groups and processing groups for a lot of the kids that are basically feeling dysregulated with what we're dealing with and how we're experiencing this collectively. We have a lot of kids that are completely dysregulated. And so how do we build into them resilience and hope that, hey, hopefully we're going to see some changes coming down the line. We don't know how soon that will be, but it will be. I believe that. So how do we build resilience instead of feeling like failures because we haven't been able to keep up with everything virtually? So we're going to have a lot of work to do with, providing continuing sustainable services for these kids to process the trauma that they've been through, because this is hugely traumatic for all of our youth and for everybody. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to meet them where they're at. What does that look like? So far, I've been partnering with, I am located in Sammamish, so I've been working with the Snoqualmie Valley Community Coalition, and we're actually working on a new training for youth and adolescents for suicide prevention. And we're also providing spaces through the garage, and we're working with people with Influence the Choice, Jerry Blackburn, who manages that. So we're offering spaces for youth and adolescents and communities together. And it's one of those things to where we have to realize what we can offer are virtual spaces. In-person spaces, we're still masked, we're still on lockdown, So what does it look like to open up these spaces? It's really difficult to get kids to engage after they've been online on school all day to kind of want to come and participate in some of these. Yeah. So we have to keep working on how do we engage them? How are we able to capture them? And so one of those, things that we've been able to be creative about is actually showing up in a class at their school. Mm-hmm. a captured audience there. So how can we start helping them that way? So they don't have to get out of school and we don't have to wait for them to log on. We've got them. So like I said, it's one of those things to where we're utilizing those spaces where they're already together and in community with each other, and we can process this stuff together. I think kids are going to be coming closer. And like I said, everybody's been rattled in different ways and different forms and fashions. And so how are we going to keep regulating ourselves back to or something new moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what that is or what that looks like. So how are we regulating ourselves in the unknown and the unexpected difficulties faced? And then, I mean, there's so much.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I think you're pointing out too, that there's the here and now, and how do we get through the here and now, and how do we support young people, teachers, parents, and we have sessions each week if you with teachers and with parents that maybe we can put in the chat for people. We also this week really launched, but we've been doing this work for years, but launched a marketing campaign around our mental health services. So go to our website to look for that, everyone. And that's really for all ages, for young people, for older folks, for teachers, for parents, anybody. So yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn to Philip, and you're going to we'll come back to you, Melinda, as well. Philip, we appreciate you joining. Always enjoy a conversation with you. Philip is a resident manager at Roy Street Commons, which is a building that we started to use this year. The short of the story is that the owners of the building had been Airbnb-ing the building, and that economy, that sort of business model dried up during COVID, and they reached out to the Y, and we were able to work with the county and with some private funders to be able to lease the entire building, 40 units for young people. They each have their own studio apartment on Capitol Hill, which is a great location where young people want to live. And Philip is one of those people that moved in, but he moved in as a resident manager. So Philip, for you, what's working? How are the young people doing at Roy Street? What's been so important about moving into Roy Street for them? Which I think mostly happened. What was it? September is when we moved folks in.
Yeah, right around then. So one thing I will say. So she was just talking about how we don't really have access to physical spaces where people can interact with each other person to person. We're in a unique situation where that's not 100% true. There's a few, I think, significant pieces to the puzzle that allow us to help with the connection side of things. The first being, it's not uncommon for someone to walk up and be like, hey, and they'll ask for something, and then you can tell they really want to have some sort of conversation, and you end up having a prolonged hour conversation. That may be the only conversation they have. Or we have the kitchens where people were hanging out for a little while, obviously wearing masks. We got to throw an event during Halloween. Everyone was 6 feet apart and they were wearing masks, but people were able to come together, and Jaquay, one of our case managers, was able to really have a talk with everybody, and really
fantastic.
There's no solution to any of this, but at least we get a few moments where we can offer some person to person communication that doesn't involve that screen.
It's so important. Yeah. And I think Sally's going to hit on this, but young people in particular need interaction with other young people, and that's kind of where they get their juice, right? And some of their self-esteem is through relationships with other young people. The young people you're working with, and at Roy Street, are young adults. I think that what I just said about young people kind of getting that juice and self-esteem from others is really true for adolescents and teenagers, kind of in high school, etc. But also for young adults, you're kind of forming, who you're going to be, and your sort of feelings about yourself during this period. And so it's both been helpful for them to be living in the same building, but also to have that space to be able to be by themselves, right? Have their own apartment in the building. And right, I mean, this firsthand, but many of the young people moved from living outside or from shelters, into having their own space to live, right?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time at the Orion Center and New Horizons. They are like living, like everyone got our own mat. There was about 50 of us. You sign up, and at least at that time, you hoped you got in. And when you didn't, I remember sitting on this bench with a backpack, staying up all night, like hoping that no one would take my stuff. So there's definitely a lot more people that would find themselves in positions like that. Or like I used to sleep at the beach, and you've got sand fleas like biting at you all night. Or you go to the library or ABC coffee shop, and you lay down like your head, and you got like 45 minutes before the clerk comes and like taps you on the shoulder, and it's like, hey, like please, you gotta either leave or buy something, or you just can't be sleeping here. And so now people don't even have the library to go into and spend 45 minutes getting a nap. So if you find yourself being woken up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, you don't really have that. Roy Street didn't even exist before COVID, which is awesome, by the way. We got 40 beds for people.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, and thanks for sharing that kind of personal aspect of it too. So many young people, I think, are appreciating having this housing. We've opened some other housing during this year. I'm going to come back to the panel. We're gonna pause and kind of move into a different segment. Thank you, everyone, for your honest and thoughtful answers. You do such great work for us. All the panelists stay on the call and come back after the next presentation and join us for the Q&A. For the audience, if you have questions for any of our panelists, I see some already. Please type those in the chat box. And if it's for a specific person, please list their name. Next, we're going to have Sally Sundar, a program executive for health integration and transformation work with the Y, lead us through a presentation on the Y's whole person health model and how we're activating it for youth in crisis during the pandemic. But before Sally begins, we have a short video to share with you. So let's watch that.
We have a situation on our hands, and the clock is ticking. Every child deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential, but many kids are getting stopped on their way. Right now, we are seeing which kids have the support they need to grow up happy and healthy, and which kids just simply don't. Roadblocks like economic inequalities, lack of accessibility, and systemic racism pop up and often prevent kids from succeeding at school, home, and in the future. The good news is that there are solutions. This moment is a call to action, and how we react now will determine how we and future generations will recover. At the Y, we believe in a future that's even better, where all kids have access to equitable opportunities and a future full of possibilities. Our accessible school support makes sure that kids don't fall behind. We provide affordable early learning programs, childcare, and access to healthy meals. We connect kids, teens, and families to community and activities through virtual Y programs. Our holistic care for kids in foster care and housing assistance programs prevent long-term homelessness. The Y supports mental and whole person health that is accessible to all. Kids and families can find all this support in one place at the Y. But we need one more thing. We need you, right now, to help all kids reach their full potential in mind, body, and spirit. So the clock is ticking, and the time to give is today.
Great, thank you. So, as we've heard from our panelists today, this pandemic is really creating new challenges and worsening existing challenges for so many young people across our county. Next slide. The YMCA of Greater Seattle's whole person health model is a framework that we use to encompass all of the services and programs we provide at the Y under our high-level goal of supporting individuals and families across all dimensions of health and well-being. Under whole person health, we recognize not only the importance of physical health, which is often the thing we're most known for as an organization, but also the need to address emotional well-being and mental health, quality of relationships and social networks, spirituality and purpose, and having access to necessary resources within a strong and supportive community environment. Achieving whole person health is not only the goal outcome we are striving for on behalf of each person and family that we work with, it is also the lens through which we see the interconnected needs each of our participants brings to the table, including how those needs will vary in intensity based on someone's lived experiences with racism, with immigration, poverty, and all forms of systemic discrimination. While the term whole person health may seem new, it captures the essence of who we've been and what our mission in community has been over the last century and a half. From swim lessons to basketball to summer camp, youth in government, supportive housing, foster care support, counseling services, and beyond, we have continued to grow as a provider of whole person health for all ages and youth in particular since we were founded over 140 years ago. We're bringing those years of building community trust and expertise in serving our youth's whole person health needs into our efforts to address these challenges that have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. Slide. So as our panelist stories made clear, this pandemic has really highlighted where our communities need us most. For youth and young adults, changes caused by the pandemic on daily life have removed a sense of normalcy and routine, and many aspects of the new normal in its place are neither healthy nor sustainable. From a physical perspective, health is suffering with so much sedentary time spent indoors. The percent of children aged 5 to 17 meeting the recommended physical activity levels of 150 minutes per week has declined to below 3%. Parents report youth sitting for over 8 hours per day outside of school activities, which is 4 times the recommended amount. Healthcare providers nationwide worry that, quote, the excess weight gained during lockdown may not be easily reversible and might contribute to obesity and chronic disease into adulthood if healthier behaviors are not reestablished. Like Barbara and Aisha shared, as this pandemic goes on, feelings of hopelessness are increasing as youth are unable to go to school, to participate in life events like graduation, to see their friends. Aisha and others have emphasized how for so many youth, they are finding their social identities and self-esteem through their friendship as opposed to family. They're unable to get jobs and they feel like a burden within their own homes. A recent CDC study found that 3 in 4 young adults have reported at least one mental health problem, specifically depression and anxiety, worsening since the start of the pandemic. 1 in 4 young adults have reported considering suicide within the last 30 days. Relationships in the home are being stressed, sometimes to the breaking point. One survey found interest in divorce had increased by over 30% since April, the start of the pandemic. And while domestic violence in the home is difficult to measure due to lack of reporting, we know that calls to the National Domestic Violence Hotline have seen at least a 10% increase during shelter-in-place orders compared to the same time period in 2019. In a time of crisis, finding purpose and meaning in life are key coping skills, regardless of religious affiliation. During the traumatic events of COVID-19, many people are looking for somewhere to turn for that spiritual support. We've seen that in a surging demand for resources like mindfulness apps over the last 6 months. We also heard from Aisha just now how youth are often turn to their communities to build their cultural identities, and that is being lost during this time. A healthy community is one in which a person knows how to meet their basic needs within their surrounding environment. Almost 40% of King County students used to rely on school for access to regular meals. And since the pandemic started, the number of food insecure youth has increased nationwide from 1 in 7 to 1 in 4. Children from Black and Hispanic families are experiencing the most hunger. So this image is from the National Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, showing the phases that communities go through in response to crisis. And it's used to help mental health and human service providers like us to understand what our communities will need throughout the response to a large-scale traumatic event like the COVID pandemic. Right now, we are still in the longest, hardest phase of disillusionment. This is a time in which depression and hopelessness increase, as we've discussed, as these challenges go on and there seems to be no end in sight. And as the data we've shared with you and our panelist stories have shown, our youth are feeling disillusioned, to say the least. But our youth do not need to remain in this phase. The YMCA of Greater Seattle is providing services and programs that respond to the immediate needs of our youth and young adults across the whole person health spectrum. And we are also positioning ourselves to walk with our youth towards the new beginning phase through focusing on building resilience and hope in all that we do. Next slide. Research shows that to build resilience, youth need to feel purpose and connection. They need to learn to be flexible and be supported in making adaptations to the things they once knew, and ultimately be able to sustain hope for the future. All of our services for youth and young adults across the 5 dimensions of whole person health are rooted in reinstilling that sense of normalcy, creating purpose amidst disrupted routines, and fostering connection, even if that connection is being formed in new ways in virtual or limited in-person spaces. Building relationships and connection and providing supportive outlets for our youth has been the foundation of everything we do as a Y for decades. And if any organization is positioned to support building resiliency for youth during this time, it's the Y. From our virtual and in-person opportunities for physical activity, nutrition support, the Virtual ACT program, to outpatient mental health counseling, and the suicide prevention workshop for youth and parents that Melinda described, to services to support our overburdened parents and caregivers that are trying to balance at-home schooling with their own work and relationships, especially for families like Aisha talked about, who have 7 or more people spending 24/7 indoors in just 3 rooms, to doubling the number of meals the Y provides to community members compared to last year, as thousands of young people lose access to meals in schools, and providing housing at places like Roy Street. In all that we do, we are showing our youth that even in crisis, there is hope and support, and there is a way forward. If you read the news, you may have seen that many public health and education officials are predicting that the instability and the uncertainty that youth are experiencing during this pandemic will result in generational trauma impacting our youth for years to come. But this outcome is not inevitable. The Y has been here for our community in King County for decades. We will be here for decades to come, making sure that our youth can both meet their basic needs and feel safe and supported in building the futures that they desire. So I want to echo everyone else and say thank you to all of you for joining us. We need you now and ongoing throughout this work.
Great, thanks, Sally. And I see some questions and comments. Appreciating the data and the ideas and thoughts that you just shared. So thank you so much. That was awesome. Audience members, again, if you have questions for any of the panelists or for Sally related to her presentation, type them in the chat box and we'll address them either there or via audio. So I would love to go back to the panel. Again, we've got Philip, Aisha, Melinda, and Barbara. And start with a question maybe for you, Barbara, as we started with you before. What or how can community members help to be a part of solutions and supporting young people? What are some of the ways that that you or maybe you've seen some of your friends and community come together for young people that might be inspiring to the others on the call? I think you're still muted.
Am I still?
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
This pandemic has really brought some different things to the children. And one of the things that I've noticed, one of my children was talking about wanting to commit suicide. And immediately, there's a team that I work with weekly, really. There's a therapist, a behavior specialist, and then there's a case manager. And I use those people weekly for almost whenever there's a need. I have found out that sometimes they have to be creative. When I found out that the kids were going to have to be at home in school, I have one child who needs one-on-one attention, and I knew I could not do that because I had the other 2 that needed help too. And I called the case manager, and I told her, I says, I need you to see if normally we go to the Cold Creek Y. They are wonderful. I've used them for camp. I've used them for Christmas. I've used them for Thanksgiving. Swimming lessons, they're wonderful. But one of my boys said to me, I want to go where people look like me. I want to be a part of some brown people. And I called the case manager and I asked her, I said, would you check with the Boys and Girls Club? and see if they have a school program, because most everyone didn't. The Y didn't have a school program at that time. We were one of the first schools. Renton was one of the first schools that shut down. The kids stopped going to school, and my case manager called, and they did have a small program, and my child was accepted because he wanted to be around brown people. He wanted to be around people like him. And sometimes I don't think people realize that. They want to be identified some time of the day with somebody that looks like them, that talks like them. And I was very thankful that my case manager did. She said, we're going to see if we can get the funding. I don't know where it's going to come from. We'll try Treehouse and we'll see what we have. But whatever she did, it worked. And that's where one of my kids is going. And but they love. And so over the years, we have used many different ones. Seattle Angels is an organization that really helps foster children. And so I'm just one who, if I sit next to you and I have a need, I'm going to tell you about it. And you're going to say, no, I can't help you. Like right now, we need families of color. And so I'm always saying, would you like to be a foster parent? You know, there's a need. And so sometimes it's just word of mouth, listening to different panels and seeing who's interested, because you'd be surprised who wants to help you, right? But you need to tell them that you need help though. And I am one, when I need help, if I think I need help, I'm going to find somebody to help me. And I've had other children who talked about suicide or wanting to, but this was my first time a 10-year-old was saying it to me. And that really bothered me. It really, really bothered me. So, and I'm glad that the team that I work with saw him. Another example, the little boy, the 11-year-old who got his brother stabbed him. He was in the classroom with the same child who wanted a child of color. And I called the team. They were right on it. The mental health team was right there. And they're still checking on him weekly to see how he's doing. Sometimes he wants to talk about it. Sometimes he doesn't. But I just appreciate the team that I have, the community that works with me. I really do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're speaking to like the team at the Y that's working with you, but
right,
thank you for
exactly.
talking about the partner agencies, and that it really takes the community coming together. At the Y we do a lot, and but we also partner with a lot of different organizations, and
we do.
And someone like you you're like one of those super connectors that Malcolm Gladwell used to talk about, like just like connect to everybody, and you're even an incredible, you're talking about you're sharing these resources, no doubt, with other families and other kids. And so that's sometimes we do these marketing campaigns, but that word of mouth is sometimes like the most important. So thank you. I want to ask Melinda, would you also talk, you spoke about a couple of partnerships. Would you speak to partnerships around mental health, and how we're connecting with the Sammamish YMCA board and staff have been really committed to this issue for a number of years now, and that's been really an important resource. We have other partners that you've mentioned. Would you talk a little bit about partnerships and how important that has been to the work?
Oh, absolutely. I would say partnerships are essential. I would say a partnership that we have that I utilize consistently is our Children's Crisis Response System, just our CORES department.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're always responding to kids in crisis, and that's our King County hotline, And so, like I said, it's one of those things to where we're partnering with Crisis Connections daily, every hour on the hour. Another partnership that we have going on is like working with Friends of Youth, because they're cycling, kids in and out of housing and stuff like that need some stabilization. And we have housing too now. So how do we collectively start providing like additional housing for all of these kids that need it? And then some of the other partnerships that we have are through just working with other clinicians through Sound Mental Health, Catholic Services, providing more houses this is more for families with children, because But it's one of those things to where I was just working with a family recently. It was a father and a daughter looking for homes and housing. And it's really difficult to find a father and a daughter housing. We provide some for women with children, but children, it's a little bit different. So we're partnering with other agencies to help find these kids homes and housing. Another thing that we're also doing is working collectively with our schools. Definitely with the schools, because like I said, that's where the kids are coming up with the questions that need answers. And so we're partnering with different high schools and different locations. We're partnering with the counselors at the schools and finding out like, how can we support, what are their needs? And it's so big, I can't even like describe it in just a few moments of how many different partnerships we have out there. But like I said, right now it's the information highway and connecting with our resources. And that's basically what I find myself doing a lot of the time is like, where do we find these additional resources and supports for these things that are happening and going on? And it's everywhere. And like I said, it's more feeling like a community collective than it is in competition with this other agency. So like I said, it's coming together to benefit people in the community, really inspire people, talk about that resiliency that we all need to come back to after this big, huge global pandemic. Like I said, how can we do this? And like I said, it takes being creative. It takes thinking outside the box. It takes, adding additional components to programs that didn't exist before. What does that look like? And I will say that is one thing that I am seriously passionate about. And there I go with my passion about working for the Y Social Impact Center. Our platform is huge, and I always feel welcomed and invited to the sky is the limit with what we can do. So like I said, that's my job, and that's how I see the Social Impact Center. And like I said, if anybody has additional resources or something like that we can pull for these kids, put them in the chat box, and I guarantee somebody's going to connect with you on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been one of the inspiring things this year is that the community, local government funders, even federal like CARES Act funding has been so helpful to create kind of new resources, and really, it's not just going to take money, right, to fix all these things. We are paying, one of the things the Y's been able to do again with CARES Act funding is pay rental assistance for families that pay back rent, kind of prevent evictions. So sometimes it does take money, but it's going to take community members and support. That 10-year-old Barbara, that your foster child that is one of our community members. It's not going to, a check isn't going to work. we need a lot more support than that. I want to address, one question that Michael Orbino brought up, which I think is an important one and a tough one to answer. But he asked, can we effectively help without getting the schools back to some kind of in-person learning? Should we be pushing for children to be able to have access back inside the Y in other congregate community settings? I think, one of the takeaways I hope you have from today is how important, connections, that young people have connections beyond the screens with people, but also how important it is to keep the virus in check. We're seeing the numbers go up so much. We definitely need to follow public health guidelines, and I do think there's a lot of hope around the corner. Next year. But does anyone on the panel have anything they'd like to say? Maybe Aisha or Philip, who haven't gotten to speak in this second round. What in the absence of we're going to continue to listen to the public health guidance and the governor's rules. But what more can be done to give young people opportunities for connection?
Yeah, so there's one thing in particular that since there's so many people here, they may know people that can help, or they may be able to help themselves. A lot of people, at least here at Roy Street, aren't working. And on top of that, meaning that now they're spending even like ample time on their own, it also means they don't have access to a lot of funds. Chances are they didn't have much savings initially anyways if they're in this type of situation. Yeah. And I know everyone's having difficulty finding jobs right now, not just people in this situation. But if someone knows of like a job opportunity, or you're hiring, or you can just kind of get that word out there. That would be something that I think could really positively affect those who are over that 18 range. I know a lot of the focus right now is on those younger people for good reason, but yeah.
Yeah, that is a great point. That is a great point. Jobs are hard to come by. Aisha, you get the last word. Anything you'd add to that?
I would just reiterate what Philip said, really. I mean, there are a number of people on this call. Everybody knows somebody, right? The one thing that I really learned during 2020 and just with the work that we do is how important partnerships are. So this year I was able to really get to know other teams in the Y Social Impact Center. So I've been working with the employment team, young adult services, and really just being in constant contact with them. Like, hey, I really don't know. I felt comfortable going to others and saying, hey, I don't really know what to do. Can you help me out? And knowing that I could get that help. And if not, they would direct me to somebody else. So really just like Philip said, if you reach out to us, if you know something, know somebody, Barbara's a great connect to have too. Seems like she really knows everybody. So yeah, thank you, Barbara. But yeah, definitely what Philip said stands for me as well.
Great. Hey, I want to thank the panel. We could have talked, I think, for a lot longer today. Appreciate people spending their lunch hour with us and appreciate the panel sharing their expertise. Please keep sending us questions. We'll send out some more information about all the work that we're doing. And I get the honor of introducing Gloria Yaden, our president and CEO, who is going to say a few words in wrapping things up and closing us out. So thank you.
So that's what we got to do. Then we're here also. If you can't
Thank you so much, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. There isn't really more for me to say. You've heard it all from the experts and for those who are on the ground. I would like to emphasize just a few things before you leave us today. So again, I'm Gloria Yaden. I'm the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Seattle. We sincerely hope that you found today's presentation, including the panel discussion and the Q&A session, to be insightful and illuminating. After today's session, we hope that you have a better understanding of the deep issues that our youth are facing today and the wise approach to helping kids in crisis. That's what we're in. We're in crisis. Please continue, as Mark said, posting your questions into the chat box. If we don't respond to your questions in real time today, we'll be sure to respond in our follow-up communications after this session. So keep your questions coming. To each of the panelists, thank you. Thank you for educating us today. Thank you for your participation, for sharing your knowledge and your lived experiences. You've helped us all learn and grow today, and we really appreciate it. We so appreciate your tireless dedication to our young people, especially in this time of escalating need. Thank you for giving back to our community every day. And I know it's a labor of love every single day, and helping to remove barriers to ensure stronger futures for our young people in our community. So right now, our youth are facing unimaginable challenges. The pandemic has triggered heightened mental health issues, feelings of isolation and loneliness. We heard Barbara, even feelings of suicide. These feelings are real. There are also feelings of inequities that create barriers to access and development of our kids in remote learning environments. Our approach to these challenges is not singular or monolithic, but multifaceted to serve the whole child. You heard this from Sally today. We take a holistic approach. Our team of experts and well-trained professionals holistically address the physical and mental well-being needs of our young people. Our approach addresses the whole person collectively across the physical, mental, social, spiritual, and cultural well-being of each and every youth that cross our doors. We see the need, and every day we're applying our new learnings to this crisis. This is an ever-evolving issue, and we're learning every day. We're helping to unite our community and anchor the response to this escalating crisis. As Aisha shared, youth are missing their friends. They're experiencing social isolation. Things are so different from what we remember before March of this year. Our youth don't have the opportunity to engage with others at their peer level. And our youth are often having to step in to raise and care for their younger siblings. And as you heard from Barbara, our kids want to see other kids like them, who look like them, who speak like them, who have their shared experience. Their lack of normal routines disrupts their everyday lives and removes them from their social networks and support systems. Our expertise at the Y in resilience building and restoring a sense of safety and routine is vital, especially in this moment. It's vital to help our youth see hope and a path forward. So I've mentioned Barbara a couple of times, but Barbara shared with us a successful response during this pandemic is accomplished when we all work together. You heard from Aisha too, working together is a big part of the key. You heard about our work with Boys and Girls Club and how her foster kids are able to safely juggle the demands of remote learning and keep pace in school with their peers. So with all of that, I want us to take it all in and understand how difficult it is and how much appreciation we should have for the people who do this hard work, but also understanding what our youth are facing. Know that the Y is committed, and we have a long-standing promise to our young people. And that commitment is very simple. And that is to be there and to keep showing up for them no matter what. We need you with us. So what can you do? Show up too. We just need you to show up with us in this moment. How do you show up? First of all, take care of yourselves. Number two, check in with the young person. Ask them if they're okay. Ask again. Look beneath the words. If they need support, act. Connect them with the resources that they need. And as you consider your year-end giving plans, please think of the Y, but also think of other youth-serving organizations who do this hard work with us. We're all in this together. We need you with us. We will be able to together end this crisis with your support and with your partnership. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us today. Hopefully you'll have a wonderful holiday season. Mask up and be safe and be good to yourselves. Thank you.
And everybody stares, no one really cares. I hear them talk, but I don't believe in nothing. They ain't gonna prove impossibility, it's just a frame of mind. Behind the scenes, we got a lot of flavor. I tied at the seams, chasing those dreams. And all we need is just a little prayer. Cause you know we can't see past what seems so lost and out of time. Believing I can tell ya, we're all just doing fine. Just go about your business and simply pay no mind. Believe in better weather, it's only just a matter of time. It's only just a matter of cause I won't stop playing no shot. You know I'm saying I only ever trust myself. I only ever trust myself. I won't I won't stop swinging no shot. Though I'm thinking I only ever trust myself, but you can always put your faith in me. You can always put your faith in me. And did we fall or were we all misled? Or were we somewhere far way out our heads? Or did we falter? Just needed someone to believe. So we don't forget about it. We stand up tall, though we might be scared. I like to think I'm at the top of those stairs. So when you look up at everything you don't wanna see, well, it don't matter to me. Believing I can tell ya, we're all just doing fine. Just go about your business, simply pay no mind. Believing better weather, it's only just a matter of time. It's only just a matter of whoa, oh, oh. 'Cause I won't stop playing no shot. You know I'm saying I only ever trust myself. I only ever trust myself.